Ann Metz, and I am a visual artist based out of Iowa. The thing that just sticks with me is somebody that my husband knows said, "I'm intrigued by the folds." I think I'm going to call it the folds. I was originally inspired by landscapes. Generally, when I hear other artists say that, they're painting, abstract or literal landscapes, and I don't know that people will look at these and necessarily think landscape. I did grow up with a grandfather who was a land surveyor and civil engineer, and he was a huge rock collector and would teach us about geodes and fossils, and so I spent a lot of my childhood hunting for rocks, and I was very imaginative, so any little piece of earth or rock I'd be imagining was a whole world. My mind is just drawn to those things, I think. A huge inspiration for these were the landscapes from Dune. It was such a stunning film to see in theaters, and I immediately went and researched the landscapes that they shot in. And they shot in Abu Dhabi and Wadi Rum Valley and these insane deserts. And, desert, you just think sand, but then they have these incredible rock formations, which is a huge part of the film. I started painting about a decade ago. It was a long road to even start painting because I'd been dreaming about it my whole life. And I started doing these really tiny miniature things, which were just experimental canvases with different materials to get texture. And I mean, if you look at that, it kind of looks like a topographical 3D map. I wasn't thinking about it so much when I was making this series, but my niece Reagan came into my studio and she saw this just sitting, on something and said, "Oh, it's like a miniature version." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." Like a decade ago, I was experimenting with what I hoped would eventually be a large-scale version of that, and it's happening. It is literally what I've been imagining in my mind, but to make something so big and sculptural seemed really impossible to me a long time ago. From day one, I've always dreamt about relief work. I'm just drawn to tactile things that you can touch and have texture. I love letting people touch my work. It's just such a part of experience for me and learning for me and memory, and so I love texture. I think just being able to touch something does bring a depth to the experience. I initially was working on canvas, and then my process was too rough for canvas. I found that I started tearing through, and I was trying to work in the tears, and then it was just becoming not very sustainable for the piece to last. I also work with different types of fabric. There's something really familiar and emotional, and almost I'm getting these human forms when I use sheets. Fabrics you want to touch, these pieces that you'd want to be wrapped up in, I feel like give that. And I live on a farm that's full of junk, and so I've reused a lot of things. There's a piece with bark that is from my farm as well, and I'm trying to move more that way. When I'm working, I'm in flow, and I know that I'm not necessarily working out my emotion on the canvas, but it's definitely steeped in the emotion and what I'm working on at the time, and I'm not necessarily trying to evoke something, just because so much of life and exploring who you are serves your work, whatever that may be. And then I'm just also influenced by observing people doing their own work. Like my brother, he's in construction, and just his processes and his tools and materials, I'm constantly inspired by that. And I've had concrete on my mind for a while, and then just recently a friend's mom was making a gravestone for her grandson's cat, and they were just casting concrete. And I thought about using it for a long time, and then just seeing someone just very quickly do it in their backyard, I was like, why am I not doing this? And so I'm certainly naturally building on the techniques that I've honed over time. I spend a lot of time collecting inspiration, and then when I work, I can work just very intensely focused and make work, I think, probably more quickly than I used to, and I think I pull on the recesses of my mind that's full of inspiration. It's just my form of translating my human experience. The personal work you're doing is always going to come across and inform and improve the work. So this is my vehicle for translating my human experience. It's how I follow the long curve of redemption, which builds empathy and love for myself and other people. I know my work is big and intense, but I don't find that people experience it in a dark way, and I think that's because the posture I'm sitting in my life and as I'm making the work is one that's always trying to move forward and accept and improve all of the edges of who I am. I'm always encouraged that that is true when people experience my art with all its intensity, but it doesn't feel dark.